The U.S. alone has committed more than $2.6 billion in military aid to Ukraine since the war began and pledged an additional $800 million last week. Other NATO countries have committed billions as well, but the Ukrainian government says it needs more, both in terms of volume and the sophistication of the weaponry, to push back against the Russian onslaught. And as the conflict shifts from urban warfare around Kiev to more traditional tank and artillery battles in the country's east, Ukraine's military needs are changing. To discuss what weapons Ukraine really needs to win the war, the challenges in getting them there, and what the war is teaching us about which weapons are actually effective on a 21st century battlefield. A retired U.S. Army Colonel David Johnson from the RAND Corporation is explaining what is needed for Ukraine to defeat Russia. What we are seeing is that this is a war of artillery. That's partly because the Russians have not been able to maneuver effectively, and partly because even though the terrain in the east is open tank country, since the initial Russian invasion in that area years ago, it's been dug with trenches because of the artillery they were receiving. That hasn't changed. There was a report out of the UK's Royal United Service Institute last week, which showed that while anti-tank weapons have slowed the Russians down, what's really killing them is the artillery. So I think the fact that we are seeing more artillery platforms and more munitions is a really good thing. I think we will still have to worry about the air defense challenge the Russians pose. There was an announcement that the Germans were going to give some number of its Gepard Cheetah anti-aircraft gun systems to the Ukrainians, which is a big step in a couple of ways. One is that it is a very capable system. It's common sense for shooting down Russian helicopters. And two, it's that the Germans are actually giving offensive weapon systems to somebody, said Johnson. U.S. goal is not just to help the Ukrainians, but to degrade and weaken the Russian military for the future. Johnson added that the Russians are losing in Ukraine, coupled with the fact that they are going to have a much more difficult time replacing it because of the sanctions. A lot of what everybody in the world makes now is so reliant on components that are not from that area, microchips and everything else. So his views is that the more Russians lose, the harder it's going to be for them to really replace it. And the less they have available, the less capable they'll be in the future. What are the logistic challenges of a supply effort of this size? How hard is it to get the weapons into the hands of the people who can actually use them? Johnson is saying that people just forget as they watch TV and see the maps of Ukraine. That little map is the size of Texas. It's not like Monaco or Luxembourg or something. It's a big place. The last time someone invaded Ukraine was the Nazis with Operation Barbarossa. It took from June to September to get to Kiev and take it, and they had 3.8 million combatants. The question of logistics comes down to two things. One, distance. Two, will it be interdicted by the Russians on the way in? It was reported yesterday that they hit a rail line and a couple of railheads, hoping to disrupt that. But my sense right now is that the stuff's flowing pretty well. I think some stuff is going in by air, but most of it's probably coming in on trucks and then loaded onto rail. That's a very efficient way to move stuff. The supply chain appears to be in place, it seems to have a fairly high tempo, and thus far it does not seem to have suffered serious direct disruption, Johnson said. About the new Phoenix Ghost drone the U.S. Air Force has designed specifically for Ukraine, Johnson says it sounds like it's essentially a souped-up Switchblade. They're not publishing its specific capabilities, which I agree with, but it's not like secret squirrel stuff. It's not a wonder weapon the Air Force has been hiding.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comment section. The membership link is in the description.
Rescues every day. We had a guy last week, it's 6 rescues in 6 days. You know, he's doing the job every day.